Welcome to the Crypto Podcast. You can find all our episodes on thecryptopodcast.org. We're also on BitChute and YouTube, and you'll find the links in the podcast description. I forward our podcasts, The Awakening to tell you what's going on in the world, Meditation to chill you out, Speaking Podcast to help you speak in public, and to learn Polish, which you might need to, but if you want to learn a new language, why not? You'll find them all on roycall.com. Today, my guest, please welcome Brian DeMint.
Hi, Roy. A pleasure to be on your show today. Really excited to talk to you.
Yeah, and looking forward to this as well, because I've reviewed a few of the things that you're doing. So you might let the listeners know. Who's Brian?
Well, I'll give you the shotgun blast. I started in the Bitcoin crypto industry, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of terms for the industry, I guess, at this point. But I started with a pretty skeptical lens. I mean, my introduction to it was 2012. I was reintroduced to it in 2013 by a friend that said, you need to take a serious look at this. And so I analyzed it really to try and kind of discredit and disprove the technology. I think that's a lot of people's initial outlook on Bitcoin, and it's digital, scam money. It's a pyramid scheme, something like that. I threw out all kind of the basic comments. But through study, through a real deep dive into that realm of the Bitcoin blockchain industry, I came out on the other side really appreciating it for what it was. It prompted me to do a deeper dive into macroeconomics, monetary systems, monetary theory, and that kind of perpetuated me into investing. I think that's a lot of the natural progression for most people, is to step in and buy a little. Then you become maybe a little bit more freedom or liberty minded, because you realize what the liberty implications of a decentralized currency are. And I realized through that there's just a huge need for education in the space. So in 2018, I was hired as the chief marketing officer for a little blockchain project called Atheneum Blockchain, and it is still focused on a decentralized education platform. And I absolutely believe in that vision of the project, but I saw a huge need for educating specifically the fundamentals of Bitcoin and blockchain. And so in late 2021, I resigned from that post to write my book. It's called Bitcoin Evangelism. And the point of the book is just to help people understand some of these kind of nebulous terms like blockchain or trustless or decentralized, and to break them down in a really basic and easy to understand way, so that when somebody approaches you and says, "Why do you buy that Bitcoin stuff?" Your response isn't going to be, "Just because I believe the price is going to go up someday." That shouldn't be our response. There's a lot more to it than that. And that's essentially my mission, is to help educate people on this really incredible technology that has a lot of great potential to set humanity free in a lot of ways.
Excellent. And I'm always an early adapter. So for LinkedIn, Facebook, a load of these things, even Gmail, I have everything with my name, where I call them that, because, and I remember, I don't know, was it 2014? I was introduced to Bitcoin and I didn't get it. And I think it's a shame, because obviously in 2014, it would have been a great time to get into it. But I kind of was hearing so much about it. Because I'm an avid reader. I'd read about 100 books a year. And I think it was the Kindle Unlimited. So I got a load of electronic books on crypto. And to be honest, I was more baffled than anything. And I just never got into it. And because I love what you're actually doing, because what I'd like today, it might sound strange for you, but I'd like that you could actually explain it to me as if I'm the 8-year-old child, my youngest son, or my dad who's 76, who don't get it. Because I think that's the kind of way we need to explain it, because there's so many people, they're talking about it. And I know for myself, how I got on board is somebody sat down with me and kind of showed me, this is alleged, this is how you, because it's hard kind of going out on your own. But you might, I suppose, if you don't mind, talk about it in a kind of more simple way for the masses.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You need to be able to talk to a broad audience with this, because sometimes the 8-year-olds, they're so technologically savvy that sometimes they get it. I think especially things that we're going to probably get into, like the metaverse and some of these really strange kind of adaptations of blockchain and digital technologies, they get that stuff right away. But some of the people that I had beta test my book were I specifically went to seniors, people 65 and older, that I figured would maybe, one of the terms I use in the book are digital natives versus digital immigrants. The older generation are digital immigrants. They grew up in a world where everything was analog, right? And so they saw the advent of cell phones, they saw the advent of the internet, they saw the advent of all these things. So they adopted those, many of them. But people that were born after 2000, they're digital natives. They grew up in this. And so being able to explain the same thing to two different people, it sometimes takes a different explanation. And so you have to kind of be ready to go one way or the other. Am I speaking to somebody that was born into this stuff, or am I speaking to somebody that's still trying to figure out how to log into their Netflix account? And so what I would say for things, the first thing I would talk to them about is, because most people have heard that term blockchain. Blockchain's the kind of the sexiest term out right now. Businesses are trying to somehow find a way to integrate a blockchain, and a lot of times that doesn't even make sense what they're trying to say. But I would tell somebody, if you want to understand what a blockchain is, you don't need to understand all the technical jargon that goes with it. You don't need to understand computer programming. What makes a blockchain so revolutionary is that for the first time ever, two people could interact digitally with no middleman. All a blockchain is, it's a computer algorithm. You could say it's a very complicated one, but in its simplest form, it's a computer algorithm that allows you on the other side of the world to interact with me with no middleman. Most people don't understand that, say, for example, on a financial transaction, if I want to send you money, do you have Venmo where you're at?
I don't, but I've heard of
You
Venmo.
don't.
It's
You've
like
heard of Venmo.
It's like Revolut is one of the ones that's kind of used
Yes.
in a lot of countries.
Revolut's more international. So here in the United States, everybody uses, not everybody, many people use Venmo. It's a popular payment app. Well, if I were to Venmo or use Revolut to send you money, it's not a two-party transaction. Bitcoin, if I were to send you Bitcoin across the world, it's literally a two-party transaction. It's you and it's me. If I were to send you a Revolut payment, it would be a 5-party transaction. And what I mean by that is it would be me initiating the payment, and then it would be my bank. So I use Wells Fargo, it's a popular bank here in the United States. Wells Fargo would then send that to Revolut, and Revolut, this actually might even be a 6-party transaction. Revolut would use some sort of international wire transfer to transfer that from their stateside banks to their European side banks. And then that's called a Nostro Vostro account. It's a really kind of funny sounding term, but it's just this international banking term. And then what they would do is they would send that to your bank, and then that would finally get to you. So instead of me directly sending you money, we're going through 5 or 6 parties. Every one of them is going to take some sort of cut along the way. So there's fees involved with that. And I don't know how much you've been paying attention to things that have been happening in Canada and some of these international shutdowns. Banks and or governments can get involved in that transaction and shut it down at any time. So I'll go back to my original statement, is what a blockchain does is it pairs two people through a digital platform, but there's no middleman. So it's literally kind of this mindless algorithm that's just there to process transactions. When person A wants to send money to person B, it doesn't know who you are. It doesn't know why you're doing it. It has no bias. It has no discrimination. It's just, it knows that its job is to send money from point A to point B, and that's it. So that's what a blockchain is. And that's, in a nutshell, that's how we like to break down a lot of these terms kind of within cryptocurrency. But I think the most fundamental and foundational is to understand the blockchain first.
And like where it could be an advantage as well is the value if you're sending a larger amount, because I've dealt with a load of different currency exchange. I even had a company doing currency exchange at one stage, and I really like the Revolut model because it's, yeah, you're right, because I have to transfer it from my bank into my Revolut account, but it's instant. So if I send it to you, it's actually instant, which most of them aren't. I mean, I've had times when I was doing currency exchange for properties years ago, it could go 2 weeks. It goes into the ether for 2 weeks. Like, it leaves my bank account in Ireland and doesn't arrive for 2 weeks into Poland. And it's like, and with the Revolut, but what I found is when you're sending larger amounts, you have to go through a lot of red tape and a lot of regulation, which can, you know, there was one stage there, it was like 3 weeks that they held up the thing. We'd made a big sale, and it took a lot of time to actually get it cleared, which was annoying. But for short, small amounts, me to you, I send it now, you get it in 5 minutes, which is great. But with the crypto, you don't have that problem.
Correct. And in terms of sending large amounts, there was something I cite in the book is kind of a little bit of analysis on this. In, I think it was December of 2021, there was a 1 billion, and this is kind of an interesting thing about the Bitcoin blockchain, is you can kind of go and see these transactions happening. You don't know really who's sending it to who, but you can see these massive transactions happening. There was a $1 billion transaction. It might have been somebody just transferring money from one of their wallets to one of their other wallets, or it was probably in all reality an exchange doing something with their funds. But it was a $1 billion transfer in US dollars in the form of Bitcoin. And the transaction cost was $1.75. Now, I have a chain of businesses. Our merchant services fee is about 3%. So if somebody were to come in and swipe their card for $100 transaction, the fee would be $3 plus 30 cents. So it'd actually be $3.30. So the fee on a $100 transaction for me and my business is about twice as big as a $1 billion transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. So for sending large amounts, it's actually pretty amazing what you can do with value transfer internationally and around the world and very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm fresh out of 1 billion, but I also know on the opposite end of this, opposite end of the scale, when you're sending like small amounts, like $10 or $5, it can be a kind of high percentage. It can be fairly, it's justified going through that system.
Yeah, you're right. And are you familiar with, have you heard of the Bitcoin Lightning Network? Excuse me, Lightning Network. Have you heard of that?
I've just heard of it, but I don't know nothing about it.
Okay, so it's a really interesting kind of second layer. They refer to it as a second layer solution. So if the Bitcoin protocol is your foundational protocol for sending value, the Lightning Network is a lighter, faster second layer. It's almost kind of works like bar tabs. So when you go to the bar, you go and buy a few beers, you buy, a round for your friends, you get all these transactions. And at the end of the night, you batch all of those transactions into one payment. So at the end of the night, your bar tab, is $150 US, and you pay that, and it's one transaction, even though you had many, many interactions with the barkeeper throughout the night. And that's kind of what the Bitcoin Lightning Network does. It reduces fees and it speeds up these transactions tremendously. Because even with Bitcoin, you could have, a 10-minute transaction, a 20-minute transaction. Sometimes Bitcoin, the base layer, can be slowed down. So the Lightning Network, it's instant, it's basically free. So it's even cheaper than the Bitcoin, the main ledger. And it's just fractions of a percent in terms of sending these transactions, because everything's being batched. They're doing things in a much more efficient model. And that's a protocol that's being built out. It's I don't know how familiar you are with El Salvador and them adopting Bitcoin. They are on the Lightning standard at this point. So all of their kind of merchant transactions are being run through the Lightning Network and then being batched out on the base Bitcoin protocol.
And because we know that with Bitcoin, Nagasaki created, whoever it is, I always like to know your thoughts on that as well. But who's created this light version?
So it's another decentralized group. For example, I run a Bitcoin Lightning node. I make tiny fractions of percentage. So it's a way to, you can accrue a little tiny bits of Bitcoin for doing it. It's not really a huge moneymaker. It's really for people that want the network to be built and to thrive. So out of my house, and it's not like Bitcoin mining. You might have heard if you want to mine Bitcoin, you need these big, huge, expensive machines, and they put off all this heat and they're energy intensive. With the Bitcoin Lightning Network, you just buy this little thing called the Raspberry Pi. I don't know how familiar you are with these little
can
tiny.
You eat it? Can you?
Yeah, you know what? You might be able to. It's pretty small. But it's this tiny computer, and I have it just up in my upstairs loft, and it processes transactions for people all over the world. And I don't do it to make money. I do it to aid the network. And so there's a team of developers, hundreds of developers. It's called the Lightning Labs team. But even Jack Dorsey, he has his new company, or not his new company, but Block, what was formerly Square, was a payments company in the United States. He has a whole team devoted to building out the Bitcoin Lightning Network. It's one of those things where there's groups all over the place. And it's kind of what's cool about this is that a lot of them don't even know who each other are. They're just building a common purpose. And it's because it's decentralized, it can work that way. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And it's really, I think, the solution for sending those small payments. I think it's going to be the difference between being able to buy a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with Bitcoin versus, only being able to send $1 billion transactions, which I don't think many of us can do.
No, definitely. And like with the electricity usage, because I remember, I don't know, it was in 2017, they were saying there was enough electricity usage to run all the power in Ireland. And I think it's massive now, a lot bigger. I mean, is that a bad thing?
So there's a few different arguments in that regard. Is that the Bitcoin, the power being used for the Bitcoin network, some people say, well, hey, it's a worthy cause because we're securing the world's finances. And it's a security measure and it's a worthwhile cause. I actually think that kind of gets a little over-aggrandized. One of the things I actually cover this in a little bit of depth in my book is energy consumption seems to be one of the chief accusations made against Bitcoin by the ESG movement, the environmental social governance movement, people looking to protect the environment. I think most of us want to protect the environment. I don't think anybody's out to harm the environment. But it seems to be kind of almost politically aimed to disrupt Bitcoin as a currency or as a store of value. And a lot of the comparisons you hear are, oh, Bitcoin uses the amount of electricity that a country uses. And when you look into what country they're talking about, and you mentioned Ireland, a lot of cases, what is the population of Ireland, by the way?
It's nearly 5 million.
Yeah, so they're usually referring to countries the size of Ireland or El Salvador, in the 5 to 6 million population range. And while that's a lot of people, in the terms of the United States, it's about what we use on our Christmas lights just in the month of December in the United States. So it's relatively small compared to the amount of electrical output that we use for things that are kind of these, fun things that don't really provide any tremendous value to humanity. So I think that, well, I love Christmas. I'm a big Christmas guy. I have Christmas lights myself. I think that Christmas lights are maybe a worthy cause for most people. I love Christmas lights. I put Christmas lights on my house, but I think the principle of providing a free, decentralized, immutable ledger for the whole world to store value on, I think is a much loftier idea than Americans using Christmas lights for 1 month of the year. So yes, it's all relative. The countries that you're hearing, Bitcoin uses as much electricity as a country, as an entire country. It's never going to be a country like China. It's never going to be a country like the United States, these massive countries that use massive amounts of power. Again, one of the things that I also cover in Bitcoin Evangelism is when you compare the amount of electricity used by Bitcoin compared to just the traditional banking system. So you're talking about ATMs, you're talking about the buildings, you're talking about all of that. it's a fraction of what is used just by the air conditioning in the banking buildings and things like that. So it's all relative. And I think that's how a lot of these things kind of get framed is what's the worst way to state something and make it sound the most grand or the most like it's the biggest problem because of that. It is relative. And so one of our well-known senators in the United States, her name's Elizabeth Warren. She's a pretty staunch antagonist of Bitcoin. She likes to say that, well, if Bitcoin is using X amount of energy right now, in 10 years, if it's 10 times bigger, it's going to be using, 10 times more electricity. Bitcoin doesn't scale that way. Bitcoin can use more electricity, but that doesn't mean if there's more transactions, if there's 10 million more transactions on the Bitcoin protocol tomorrow, it doesn't mean that the energy usage goes up. And it's that gets into a little bit more complicated topic right there. But the energy used by the Bitcoin network is only to secure it. It's actually, it doesn't take a lot of electronic transactions. If you wanted to process all the transactions on the Bitcoin network, you could do it with just a few computers. Sorry, my audio is a little weird. You could process all the transactions on the Bitcoin network with just a few computers. The reason why there's so many computers mining Bitcoin and doing all this stuff that's consuming all this electricity, it's to secure the network. The Bitcoin network, the Bitcoin protocol, is the most secure computer network in the history of the world. It's more secure than any kind of clandestine organization around the world. Stateside, we have the FBI and the CIA. Those are kind of our top secret agencies that have all the secrets and that kind of stuff. They don't have as robust of a security as the Bitcoin blockchain has because of its decentralized nature and because of how much power it uses. It consumes so much power because in order to essentially hack the Bitcoin network, you would have to have more power than all of the power that is on the Bitcoin network right now. So that's what, so you can kind of reverse that argument and you can make it sound really positive. You could say, in order to hack the Bitcoin network, you would need more power than an entire country in order to hack the network, which sounds pretty, it doesn't sound feasible in order to hack the network. So we could turn something that sounds negative, oh, it uses so much electricity. Well, then we could turn it into positive. It would take and cost so much electricity in order to rob people of their Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And just for those, because I just mentioned it because it's what I'm hearing, but I know that because we've had the founder of Greenpeace on our show and everything, and I've also done research myself, and we're hearing a lot of things about the polar caps melting and the polar bears dying, and it's all a lie. There's so much lies out there, and we just have to be conscious of that as well, that sometimes the people that are kind of putting fear into us, they're trying to create something, that it's actually the opposite of what's really happening. And I think the beauty of what's actually happened in the last few years, another plan, as from my experience, is that loads of people realize that the value of living at home instead of traveling for hours and being in a big, huge building, which in turn will mean there won't be a demand for these buildings. So in reality, the energy usage around the world should drop dramatically.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's totally true. And for anybody that is interested in sustainable energy, solar energy and wind farms and things like that, I would even make the argument that Bitcoin is actually going to be the key to renewable energy. And I don't know if you're familiar with this argument, but last year in 2021, in the winter in Texas, so the biggest state in our country, we had a total blackout in huge parts of the country, or in huge parts of the state. Because most of Texas is run on solar power and wind power. And so that's one of the shortcomings of these renewable energies, is that when there's no sun, you don't have power, or in this case, all of the wind, the windmills, they froze over. They weren't rated for that type of severe cold in Texas. Texas usually doesn't get that cold. Well, last winter it did. And so everybody lost their power. People were actually dying. They were freezing to death. Older people were freezing to death in their homes because they didn't have any heat. They didn't have any electricity. It was actually a really, really sad and kind of traumatic story. But what we're seeing this year is Texas is adopting Bitcoin on a massive scale in order to build out their grids. And so what I mean by that, to build out their solar and actually specifically their wind power grids, one of the reasons why you would, when you're building, say, a solar farm to power your city, it's usually not very economically feasible because, again, the sun only shines so much. There's really inconsistencies in the weather, and you don't get to store a lot of the energy, or basically much of the energy at all, that you create if you have abundance. And so what do you do with abundant energy is you waste it. And so it's actually very costly to build these things out. And so a city is usually going to underbuild their solar farms. And if they have any kind of increased demand for utilities, say they have a heat wave, and so everybody's turning on their air conditioning units, a lot of times you get blackouts, and so people don't have enough power. Cities are usually underbuilding their solar farms. Well, what you can do, and what in Texas, what they're doing is they're overbuilding their solar farms, they're overbuilding their wind farms, and it makes economic sense because anytime they have excess power, they use that power, that totally green power, to mine Bitcoin, and they can make money from their excess power. And if there's a spike in demand, say a cold wave or a heat wave or anything like that, then what they can do is they can shut off their Bitcoin miners, and they can use all of that excess energy to provide heat and utilities for their people. And it makes economic sense. And so I like to call myself a bleeding heart capitalist. I love capitalism. I think it solves a lot of our, free markets solve a lot of our problems, but I also think that we need to have a tinge of humanity in the way that we do it. And so I think I love these types of solutions, finding green energy initiatives that make economic sense. Because a lot of the ones that we're seeing, a lot of green initiatives that we see, they don't make economic sense, and they actually a lot of times hurt people. So I think this is a great middle ground. It's a great compromise, and it's a really positive solution for a lot of people.
Well, I'm hoping, because I've seen the technology now that they can put it into windows and everything, but I've heard that you can't recycle these solar panels, and also the wind turbines I've seen where they actually had to bury them. And I'm looking at this going, what? But yeah, like what you've just said, using the energy like that makes sense. I mean, that's
yeah. Well, everything has a cost, right?
Exactly.
all the lithium we mine for these batteries and things like that, that's all a pollutant too. And we're using fossil fuels to mine those things. It's everything costs energy.
Yeah, exactly. So. I don't think there's anything that we can say is actually perfect. So with the wallets and the exchanges, then which ones do you actually recommend?
So for onboarding, I think a lot of the people that I know, they went with just the easiest to use platform here stateside is Coinbase. I don't know. Do you guys have Coinbase where you're from?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I know they're a pretty large company. They're kind of more expensive on the fees. It's a good place to start for people. It's very user friendly. It's a simple way to, I tell people all the time, buy $10 worth of Bitcoin, buy $50 worth of Bitcoin, just get in the game, then don't do anything else and just sit on it. Because what that does is it causes you to actually pay attention to the market. All of a sudden now you're paying attention to the price, which to me is one of the least exciting things about it. It is fun to, obviously we want the price to go up, but I think the technology behind it is the more exciting part. And I think that the longer people hold on to that, they start to pay attention to the fundamentals, and they start to learn, they start to ask questions, they start to study economics, and they start to kind of discover what type of monetary systems we have. And they realize that every monetary system around the world is based on a fiat currency, which is backed by nothing. And our banking systems are fractional reserve banking. And I don't know are you familiar with the term fractional reserve banking? Yeah, it's right up your alley. I mean, that's you kind of all of a sudden, it's like the cartoons where the coyote runs off the cliff and you look down and you're like, wow, I'm standing over nothing. And so that's what prompts people to really say, okay, now I'm not buying Bitcoin because I want the price to go up. I'm buying Bitcoin because it's kind of one of the only hard money assets out there. And I love gold and I love silver. I love precious metals, but I would say that Bitcoin is more gold than gold. And like I said, I love gold, but in the recent history, in the last 50 years of humanity, we've seen that anytime analog goes up against digital, digital always wins. And so while I think there's going to be a place for gold in our future, I think that Bitcoin is the digital version of it. And so I think it's going to have more real world applications going forward. And those are the types of kind of aha moments I think that people have once they've bought their first $50 worth of Bitcoin and they're in the game, they've got a little skin in the game, and now they start to make those realizations. And now it opens up their eyes to all sorts of other things. And I think just the cross section between what's happened in the last few years around the world and the convergence of things that have been happening around the world with these new technologies that are providing avenues for people to kind of resist some of the corruption that we're seeing, resist some of the tyranny in parts of the world. It's really interesting, and the timing is a really cool coincidence to see. Maybe it's not a coincidence at all. I don't know. Maybe it's destiny, but it is really cool to see that all converging at the same time.
Yeah, I think in the last few years, people have realized they've got a printing press and they just press a button, and your values go down. And
yeah.
And with the cold wallet, then, do you any cold wallets you'd recommend?
Yeah. So I personally use a Ledger Nano X and a Ledger Nano S. I bought a bunch of them, and I have all sorts of security measures to make sure that they're safe. I know Treasure is a pretty popular cold storage wallet. I tell people all the time, hey, you buy it on an exchange, that's fine. Get in the game. You can leave it on the, if you have a small amount. And I know this is kind of against crypto principles, and I love crypto principles, but go ahead. Don't worry about it. Leave it on the exchange when you have $10 of Bitcoin, or when you have 10 euros of Bitcoin, that's fine. Leave it on the exchange. But once you start to get a material amount of money saved, a material amount of value saved, you need to put it in a cold wallet, and you need to custody it yourself, and you need to put some security measures in place to make sure that you don't have any user error, that you don't get hacked, that your child doesn't throw it in the trash can and it's gone forever. I'm sure you've heard there's all sorts of stories of people that have thrown away computers and hard drives that had Bitcoin stored on it, had hundreds of millions based on today's value of Bitcoin thrown away. So you don't want to be one of those stories. But it's actually really easy to custody your own money. It's really easy to be self-sovereign over your own money. And that's kind of a new concept for a lot of us. And it feels a little foreign, and it feels a little uncomfortable. But I would tell people the juice is worth the squeeze. It absolutely is worth it to start to learn this. Because I would say start to learn it now, because the pressure is not on to put all of your money in it right now. The pressure is on, I think, for most people to start to learn about it. This is the learning phase. Get comfortable with learning about this stuff. You don't have to sell your house, put all of that money into Bitcoin, and then put it in a cold wallet. You take a little bit of money and you practice with that.
And with the cold wallet, if your child did throw it down the toilet and flushed it or into the bin or something like that, once you've got the password, the retrieval, you can actually get it all back. Yeah.
Yeah. So the hardware device itself, it looks like a flash drive. And the way we think about flash drives is, oh, I've saved my file or my crypto or whatever it is on that flash drive. That's how we think about it. But it's not that. All you're saving is essentially your password on this hard drive. If the hard drive gets destroyed, yes, exactly like you said, you can have your password stored on paper. I watched one of your episodes with one of your previous guests, I think Bush, I think was his last name. And the way he described it was great. I would recommend anybody to go back and watch that episode. And he talks about, good ways to store that. yeah, I think he said his son had spilled water on his computer at one point, but that didn't seem to hurt his crypto holdings by any chance.
And like, for those that don't know, because I use the ledger as well, you've got the two buttons. So you basically, you do your password with kind of a plus and minus with the numbers, and then double press when you confirm.
Yes.
But if you're doing a lot of transactions, do you always have to be using that device constantly?
No, it's kind of like, the way I would look at it is like your checking account and your savings account. Your checking account's going to be your daily transactions. Your savings accounts where you're going to put stuff and you kind of don't want to touch it. I know I have a few employees of mine that they treat their savings account like it's their checking account. And I said, we were talking about finances, and they made it too easy to access that money. Sometimes you want that money to be a little bit hard to access. And so just like I carry cash on me, I'll carry cash in my wallet. That cash that's on me, yes, it's kind of vulnerable. Somebody could walk up to me when I'm on the street or I'm going to the bank or something like that. They could take that cash. I hope they don't, and I'm going to try and make sure that they don't. But that's the same with crypto. It's the same with your Bitcoin. You can have a wallet that's a hot wallet. Hot wallet just means that it's online. Cold wallet just means that it's offline. Your savings should be in a cold wallet. Your checking account or what you want to spend could be in a hot wallet. That's perfectly fine. The hot wallet, it might be on an exchange. It might be just one that's connected to your computer. It might be an app in your phone, but I would keep, just enough for your spending money on there and keep your big money in a cold wallet. Pretty easy. And it's this is one of those things where in crypto, we think we're kind of reinventing the wheel, but sometimes we just take things we used to do in the old way and we just apply it to the new way. Yeah.
No, perfect. Yeah, I love that. So you might just give us a quick synopsis of your book and what you're covering on it.
Oh, well, yeah. So it's meant to be a beginner's guide. I don't know how many bull markets you've been through with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, but when the price goes up, I know that I start to get messages from people all over the place, people that I knew in high school, people that I haven't seen in 10 years, people that I've met one time, people that told me that they heard that I was the Bitcoin guy from one of their friends. And I mean, this was before I even worked in the industry. People would just hear that you know something about Bitcoin, and then their friend will tell them to ask you about it. And that's a common thing. I mean, if you've told anybody you have Bitcoin, this is going to happen to you. So the next time Bitcoin goes up to, $70,000, you're going to start getting text messages and phone calls. Hey, tell me about this Bitcoin stuff. Most people have a hard time explaining what Bitcoin is. They don't know what a blockchain is. They don't know what mining is. They don't know what all the things you just explained. They don't know what a hot wallet is, a cold wallet. They don't know what a ledger is. And that all sounds really complicated. The best place to start would be with a book like this. I mean, this is literally meant to be a resource that you could say, oh, my uncle just asked me about this Bitcoin stuff. Well, you know what? I don't know if I can explain it all to him. I'm going to buy him a copy of Bitcoin Evangelism, because I'm going to take him from a 101 understanding of it. Here's the fundamentals, here's the basics. And we're going to go through macroeconomics. We're going to go through some of the technical stuff, but we're going to break it down in a really easy to understand way so that you can come out of the other side of it. And you could walk into the boardroom of a cryptocurrency company and have a meaningful conversation with the executive team of that cryptocurrency company, because you understand the terms, you speak the language, and it's not that hard. I'm not a very smart guy. You can probably tell by this interview already. I'm not that smart, but these concepts, they can sound really smart. It's like finance. I don't know if you've ever talked to anybody that's in finance. They use these terms that, like subprime mortgages and, blah, 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 and this account and nostro vostro, like we talked about earlier. All this stuff means they have really basic, easy to understand meanings, but they make these new terms up in order to make them sound more complicated. And so sometimes we like to do that in cryptocurrency. We like to talk about, things in a kind of abstract way. Well, Bitcoin Evangelism, it's a really simple way to break it down. And so, like I said, we go through the fundamentals of Bitcoin and blockchain. We go through the fractional reserve banking system. We go through fiat currencies, what that means. I have a chapter in there that addresses some of the cultural divides. I know in the United States, we have some pretty significant cultural divides between our conservative people and our more liberal people. And from what I understand, that's a pretty common theme kind of around the world. There seems to be a lot of cultural divides. And I would say that a lot of these cultural divides are being driven by monetary policy, by unfair monetary systems. I think that's the core of it. I mean, it's not that shocking to think that, people say that money is the root of all evil. I think your Awakening podcast, you seem to explore a lot of the corruption and things that happen in a lot of different industries. Well, I mean, it's not that shocking to think that the one industry that deals with something that we call the root of all evil is like the most corrupt industry of all of them. I mean, it's what's financing the pharmacy companies. It's what's financing the news organizations. It's what's financing all these different things. And so to recognize that that's a pretty problematic system, I think it's what's driving a lot of the divides that we're seeing right now. And so I have a chapter in the book that's called Why Both the Capitalists and the Communists Will Be Satisfied with Bitcoin. It's because I think that this speaks to people on both sides of the political ideology or the fiscal ideology. Because I think at the end of the day, most people, they want financial inclusion. Most people want equality. Most people want a level playing field. But for some reason, we're kind of battling against one another on a bunch of these other petty issues. And some of them are big issues. I don't mean to belittle some of the issues, but we tend to shoot arrows at the other side. But I think there's a lot with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, decentralized finance, and some of these things within crypto that can bring us together. And so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I love that. So you might, and just on that, actually, I wish I had read your book before it was read, obviously, in the time when I was reading stuff, because to be honest with you, there's a lot of crap out there. And I've just recently read an NFT book, and because I could see, I missed the Ethereum boat, I missed the Bitcoin boat, because they were both handed to me at a very early stage, and I said, next time I'm not going to do that. So I'm creating NFTs because I've got access to the right people, and I want to totally understand. And I've read a book that's just brilliant, and just by listening to you, the way that you're explaining something, that's the way you're able to digest it, understand the reasoning behind it, instead of just using terminology that just flies over your head. So I just know, and I've listened to other interviews that you've done as well, I just know by the way that you do it, that the book will be good. So I'll encourage people that if you're on a beginner's journey, definitely to check it out. So you might let people know where they can find the book and where they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share that. I really appreciate it. So the book is out next month. It's going to be out in May. And if anybody goes to freshlymintedbooks.com, you register, you just put your email address in there. You just type it in one time. That registers you for the first edition. Now, the first edition, this is kind of exciting. This is one of the cool things that we can do with Bitcoin. I've actually encrypted, I've embedded a Bitcoin wallet. It currently has $1,000 worth of Bitcoin in the wallet. The first edition of the book, it has a 24-word seed phrase hidden somewhere in the book, and whoever discovers that 24-word seed phrase first, they can download a Bitcoin wallet, they can put that 24-word seed phrase in, and they win the $1,000 worth of Bitcoin. So again, if you want to do that, if you want to buy the first edition of the book, it's called, or the website is freshlymintedbooks.com, and you just put your email in. That'll register you for the first edition, and then we'll let you know once the book is for sale, and we can get it to you. And you can you can, maybe you don't even have to buy your first Bitcoin. Maybe you can just get $1,000 worth of Bitcoin just by finding it in the book. So yeah,
very creative marketing idea. I love it, and I hope it leads to loads of sales for you. So thoroughly enjoyed our conversation,
yeah.
Brian.
Thank you, Roy. I really appreciate it. I hope we can chat again sometime.
No, definitely. So
all right.
That's all for the Crypto Podcast. You can find all our episodes on thecryptopodcast.org. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, 5-star review. Really helps. Until next week, take care.